Now let's turn to Tim Duncan. He retired today in the manner in which he played and carried himself throughout his 19-year Hall of Fame career with the San Antonio Spurs. He did it without much fanfare. No goodbye tour, no parade. Duncan dominated his position for stretches of his career, but had no interest in consuming the news cycle. Duncan reportedly won't even show up at his own retirement news conference tomorrow. From his native St. Croix to Wake Forest to the Spurs, Duncan has thrived being a bit off the main grid and staying true to his identity of being an unassuming NBA star who kept his personal life private. Duncan's numbers are staggeringly good. 1,001 wins, 496 points, 15,991 rebounds, 3,020 blocks, a 5-time NBA champ, 2-time NBA Finals MVP, 2-time NBA MVP. Bruce Bowen, Duncan's former teammate with the Spurs, offered up a reflection on his career.
A house will not stand without a solid foundation. I never realized the importance of structure until I became teammates with Tim Duncan. The big fundamental is an example of having the foundation that has led to 5 championships with one organization.
The San Antonio Spurs have won the NBA championship.
But it's not just about the accolades. It's the process of learning, accepting, then teaching others to become better. Learning the NBA game with David, Sean, Avery, TD earned Rookie of the Year, and things changed.
TD, what are we in? On pick and roll, what are we in? We're in heads, let's go.
The Hall of Famer that Pop recognized began to demonstrate all the qualities of the best ever. It wasn't the MVPs or championships. It was the teacher in him starting to take shape and helping others to become future Hall of Famers by example of selflessness. He saw the big picture and not the Polaroid picture that in time fades away if he made it about him and not team. A teacher understands to let individuals be themselves to allow the artwork to take shape. With a watchful eye, making sure that what once started as creativity is now a masterpiece. Who knows where TD would be without the influence of Pop? Maybe just another good NBA player? But with Pop, the psych major from Wake Forest has become the best ever.
We take his greatness for granted because he does it on such a consistent basis, night after night, year after year.
TD, I salute you, brother, not just for celebrations in June, but for allowing me to be part of an incredible journey, which could not have happened without you.
And Bruce Bowen joins us on the phone. And Bruce, I'm struck by a couple of words that you used in that essay. Number one is teacher. How did Tim Duncan teach you?
Well, you know, so many times people think of superstars and they're enamored with what they've seen or what they've heard about the individual. But I believe the true greats take time to influence in a different manner. And sometimes it's the way you think the game through, is the way that you don't allow the moment to be more than what it truly is. Tim had a way of easing things for me where after games during playoff series, I remember we would sit in his room and just talk for hours. And in those hours that we talked, I was getting a chance to really learn something from someone that I didn't have that thought process of learning from. So when you spend that time, I think that's the great evaluator of life, is when you reflect and you see that it wasn't just about the things that you guys talked about. It's the things that you took away from those talks that you had that allows you to be a better individual.
Bruce, another word was structure. In what way did Tim Duncan offer structure for you and the Spurs when you were playing there?
It was always about play to your strengths. And that structure, there's lines of discipline. And those lines are, Tim could look at me at times and shake his head saying, I don't want that new and creative Bruce. I want that other Bruce that his strengths are in this area, and he knows that, and he's not trying to tinker with the things that he has. You have a skill set, Bruce. I want you to bring that skill set each and every night so that we can do the things that are necessary in order for us to win. A lot of times guys get outside those lines of discipline and the structure, and, you know, you end up talking about what could have happened if someone was able to do their job. He made sure that, no, Bruce, we want you to stay right here. And he because of our relationship, you just listen to it even more. You know that it's not in a matter of him trying to be above you or anything like that. That wasn't his personality. But it was something that he felt like, well, because we are close, I can share these things with you and not worry about having to go back to you and apologize or try to stroke your ego after that.
Bruce, in about 25 seconds, if you can here, you also mentioned selflessness. How is it in the manner in which he retired today, does that define Tim Duncan's selflessness?
Oh, man, 25 seconds, now that's 20. It's difficult, but I'll share this with you, Andy. The fact that he was the originator when it came to guys taking less so that they can keep a group together. Tim, Tony, and Manu. Everybody's going to remember that. Manu had opportunities to go elsewhere. But Tim, understanding the value of having those three together, I'm sure he didn't see all the victories that they received. But at the same time, he knew if that team was together, they would have a chance to achieve something very special. And that's what you've seen in him. So with that being said, I think it's that is the definition of selflessness in the day and age when it's about me, me, me.
Bruce, we appreciate it. Thank you.
We're not up for sale. We're always working on deals and our expansion globally. And, I've been saying since this thing came out, no, we're not for sale. But let me tell you what, somebody shows up with $4 billion, we can talk. We can definitely talk.
And someone did. This was no bluff. UFC was sold over the weekend for $4 billion to WME-IMG. This was a sports property bought in 2001 for $2 million by Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta. In comparison, the Dallas Cowboys are estimated to be worth $4 billion, Real Madrid $3.7 billion, FC Barcelona at $3.6 billion, and the New York Yankees at $3.4 billion. Dana White will retain his role of UFC president, but the questions remain. What will change with this sale? Before we can answer that question, we have to go back. UFC 1 in 1993 was light years from what it is today. It was held at the old McNichols Arena in Denver. Royce Gracie was the headline fighter who went up against 3 different opponents. The fight drew 7,800 people and ultimately went on to DVD. In January 2001, the UFC was sold to 3 men, including the man who has become the face of the company, Dana White. Under new owners, MMA rules were instituted. By the time of UFC 100 in 2009, the number of television households reached by UFC programming was at 415 million. It featured Brock Lesnar taking on Frank Mir in the headline matchup. UFC 100 was held at the Mandalay Bay Event Center, and the sold-out show had to be shown on closed-circuit locations all over town for the overflow. UFC 200 this past weekend could have been a disaster, with the announcement that John Jones was out due to PED use. But it was an overwhelming success. Attendance was at 18,202 for a live gate of $10.7 million. The pay-per-view buys are still being counted, but UFC 200 could end up with the most buys ever for the company. And here's what $4 billion can buy you in sports. Any individual franchise, all 2016 NBA free agent contracts, the world's 100 highest paid athletes combined 2015 earnings. And let's welcome in our guests. Brett Okamoto is an ESPN UFC analyst and ESPN sports business analyst Darren Ravel, who reported the $4 billion sale figure. And Darren, I do want to start with you on this. How did this sale go down?
Well, I would say, Andy, first of all, the reason why Dana White mentioned that $4 billion number is that was always the number. That number has been about for 2 or 3 months. But what happened was WME, IMG were certainly the most interested bidders. They had a bid tied with the Dalian Wanda Group, which is a huge player in China. The richest man in China is its chairman. But both Chinese parties bowed out. Silver Lake Capital, which owns a third of WME, IMG, stepped in. Michael Dell's investment group stepped in, and KKR, another big group, stepped in. And so then they're all together, and they're able to come up with the $4 billion to make this deal happen. I got to give credit, obviously, to Dana White for doing what he's done. As Brett knows, they've gotten out of they're sanctioned in all the states they're sanctioned in, and they've marketed these guys to the hilt. And it's a real credit to them that they got this number.
Brett, how's this sale going to affect the sport?
I think initially it's not going to affect it too much. I think fans are going to see the product that they're used to seeing. You don't want to come out and change everything. That would probably freak a lot of people out. You still have Dana White. For now, the president of the UFC, he says that his day-to-day is only going to get busier. His workload is only going to increase with his business partner, Lorenzo Fertitta, gone. But, you know, long-term, we'll have to see. I'm sure that you spend $4 billion on something. You raise $4 billion of money to purchase the UFC. You have some ideas and directions you want to take it. So as of right now, you know, conversations I'm having, people are speculating on what those directions could include. But right now, you know, we just got to wait and see what WME wants to do with this thing.
Brett, what do you think is the reason for the growth of this sport to command a $4 billion price tag?
I think it's the star power that the UFC has been able to generate, and investors have seen that when you have the right core group of stars, this sport can be extremely successful. But something that Darren Rovell has said numerous times in talking about this sport is that there's also another side to that. It's when the stars are gone, you know, and the UFC is entering a pretty interesting time period right now with Ronda Rousey, very quiet since her loss to Holly Holm last year. Conor McGregor, he's fighting in August, but he is coming off of a loss, and he's coming off with a little bit of a spat with the UFC. And then you have John Jones, who might be gone because of that anti-doping violation. So it is an interesting time for the UFC to be selling. It's an interesting time for new investors to be getting on board, because this sport is extremely volatile. It is high highs and low lows when it comes to star power.
Brett Okamoto from ESPN UFC, thanks for joining us, as well as our ESPN business analyst, Darren Rovell. Thank you.